I used to think identity theft meant stolen credit cards, some stranger in another state using your social security number to buy a boat. I didn't know it could mean watching your own life play out without you in it. The first time I saw the ad for Olive James Consulting, I laughed. That was my name. My full name. Only, I hadn't gone by it in years. And the woman in the photo? That was Jenna, my childhood best friend. The same girl who shared lunch with me every day, who braided my hair before field trips, who held my hand at my dad's funeral. The same girl I hadn't spoken to since I aged out of foster care and disappeared into a forgettable life. But now she was me. I was on my lunch break, sitting in a shared break room that smelled faintly of reheated spaghetti and stale coffee, when I saw my name on the screen. Not my legal name, the one printed on my paycheck and junk mail. The name I had shed years ago like a skin that no longer fit. No, this was the name I had grown up with. The name I'd stopped using after the system labeled me aged out and set me loose at 18 with a garbage bag of clothes and no one to call. There it was, in bold serif font, at the top of a sleek website. Olive James Consulting. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. A random match. People named Olive existed, maybe not many, but enough. Maybe this was just someone who happened to share my old name and a fondness for crisp branding. But then I saw the photo. She was standing in front of a sunlit window, arms loosely crossed, wearing a soft gray sweater and that smug, thoughtful expression people always wear in self-help memoirs. And I recognized her. Jenna. Her hair was longer now, lightened around the ends in that beach-waved, effortless influencer way. She had a tiny scar on her right cheekbone, one I remembered from when we were 12, and she fell off the chain-link fence behind our middle school trying to impress a boy. Her eyes were the same, a green so pale they looked like old glass. I stared at the photo so long my food went cold. Jenna and I hadn't spoken in more than a decade. We grew up together in the same rundown foster home, two girls who clung to each other out of necessity more than anything else. She was magnetic, even then manipulative in ways that passed for charm, always a little too smooth with adults and cruel when no one was watching. But I never hated her. Not really. When we were placed apart at 14, I cried for days. I'd imagined we'd age out together, maybe get a crappy apartment and share frozen pizzas. Instead, she got adopted by a single mom in the suburbs. I bounced through group homes until no one kept track anymore. Life diverged. People do. But seeing her again on a website in a blazer, using my name, was like stumbling across your own obituary. I scrolled further, fingers trembling slightly. The site had a blog, polished and airy, full of inspirational quotes and curated trauma. There were articles about surviving the system, breaking generational cycles, and finding safety after state care. She wasn't just using my name. She was telling my story. Word for word, sometimes. In one post, she described how her caseworker always wore sunflower perfume and called her kiddo. I had written about that once, in a private online forum for former foster youth. It was one of those oddly specific details that felt too strange to invent, too raw to share lightly. In another post, she described a time when she ran away at 16 and lived under a bridge for 3 days. She hadn't. I had. That was the moment I knew it wasn't just borrowing. It wasn't flattery or nostalgia or even a mistake. Jenna had stolen me. I closed the website and sat in silence. Around me, people talked about office drama, weekend plans, gluten-free baking. I couldn't hear any of it. It felt like my lungs had shrunk inside my chest, like I'd suddenly been vacuum sealed into a life I didn't choose. Back at my desk, I kept clicking. Jenna, now Olive, had a presence. She was on podcasts, giving TEDx-style talks, smiling on panels about resilience. Her Instagram was a catalog of aesthetic recovery, soft lighting, yoga poses, captions about unlearning survival mode. She had 500,000 followers. And a book deal. A real one. From a real publisher. The title made my stomach flip. Unadopted. A memoir of finding myself after no one found me. That was the exact phrase I'd used in an anonymous essay contest in 2016. I hadn't won, but my piece had been published in an online collection. I'd used a pseudonym, because who the hell wants to bear their soul under a name that's been used against them? Apparently, Jenna had found it, and she'd used it as a blueprint. Over the next few days, I fell into a kind of obsessive trance. I watched every video, read every post, tracked down every quote. With each piece of content, I mapped how much of my life she had absorbed into her own narrative. She hadn't just taken my past, she had polished it, rewritten the ugliest chapters into lessons, added metaphors, marketed the pain, My scars had become her slogans. I kept thinking about the old summer we both spent in that awful group home with peeling walls and roaches in the sink. Jenna used to scribble in a purple composition notebook, pretending to be a writer. She once told me, people don't care about sad kids unless they're pretty or poetic. You gotta shape the tragedy. I never thought she meant it literally. There was a brief moment when I considered contacting her directly. I even typed out an email, cold, clinical, full of bullet points and timestamps. I listed every piece of stolen content, every overlap, every place where my experience had been regurgitated for profit. I didn't send it. Something about seeing her face everywhere made her feel untouchable. She had become one of those online saints of suffering, the kind people wanted to believe. Challenging her would make me look bitter, unstable, jealous. I was a nobody. She was a brand. And deep down, I was afraid. Afraid that maybe she really was better at being me than I had ever been. The thought rooted itself in my chest like mold, quiet, invisible, and choking. One night, I sat in bed scrolling through her social media and found a post with a childhood photo attached. I stopped cold. The picture showed two girls sitting on a swing set, one with light brown hair and a wide, practiced grin. The other me with a lopsided ponytail and scraped knees. She had blurred my face. Caption: I don't talk about this time often, but it shaped everything. That little girl next to me was like a sister. She didn't make it through the way I did, but I carry her story with me. Didn't make it through? My vision blurred. My face flushed so hot I felt dizzy. My heart galloped in my ears. She had killed me off, rewritten my life as a footnote, a tragic ghost to prop up her survival narrative. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I felt like I was being unmade in real time, unraveled thread by thread, until the version of me that existed in the world was no longer mine. People always talk about identity like it's something internal, your values, your beliefs, your sense of self. But identity has weight because of how it's seen, how it's recognized, how it shows up on paper, in public, in people's memories. And Jenna had rewritten all of it. She'd claimed my memories, reshaped my image, and repackaged it for consumption. I wasn't just erased. I was replaced. There's a moment that happens in almost every nightmare. You know it. The moment when you try to scream, but no sound comes out. When you run, but your legs don't move. That was what trying to confront Jenna felt like, except I was fully awake, and every step I took made the floor dissolve beneath me. I sent the email anyway. Just one. Direct, polite, not accusatory. Jenna, we need to talk. I know what you've done. I watched the sent notification like it might catch fire. I waited all day, then all night. No response. 3 days later, I got a letter. Not from her. From a law firm. They accused me of defamation, of harassment. They claimed I was attempting to impersonate a public figure by stealing original memoir content and persona. They demanded I delete all communications, scrub any public claims, and sign a cease and desist. The irony hit so hard I almost laughed. She'd stolen my life, and now she was accusing me of stealing it back. I took the letter to a legal clinic downtown, one of those sliding scale places where the chairs are cracked and the fluorescent lights hum just a little too loud. The lawyer was young, kind, and exhausted. He skimmed the letter, frowned, and said, "Do you have any proof?" I opened my phone, pulled up screenshots, timestamps, forum posts, the photo she blurred my face in. He nodded slowly but didn't say much. When I pushed him, he shrugged. "She's high profile," he said. "You'd need a lot of money. Or a smoking gun." I left with the sick feeling that I was less a person than a rumor. That I didn't just lack evidence, I lacked weight. I started noticing things. Subtle at first. A friend from college unfollowed me on social media. A former coworker stopped replying to messages. A girl I'd met once at a retreat posted vaguely on Instagram about toxic people clinging to trauma that doesn't belong to them. I knew Jenna, or Olive, as everyone now called her, was behind it. She had weaponized her reach, her credibility, her practiced vulnerability. And she didn't even need to name me. She just had to suggest. The story wrote itself. A troubled woman with a checkered past, making up stories for attention. Classic identity disturbance. Classic trauma envy. And I could see why people believed it. She was careful, always gracious, always a little sad, a little radiant. Her public persona was honey-laced grief, soft-voiced resilience. You couldn't accuse someone like that of malice. It would sound like jealousy. The hardest part was that I started to believe it, too. Not all at once. But in those strange, silent hours after midnight, I'd lie in bed and think, maybe I'm remembering wrong. Maybe I exaggerated. Maybe I was never that interesting to begin with. Gaslighting doesn't always come in loud, cruel sentences. Sometimes it comes in headlines and hashtags, in the way people look away when you speak, and how the world keeps affirming someone else's version of your story. By month's end, I was checking her name more often than my own, watching her book tour, reading reviews that praised her authentic voice and raw, groundbreaking honesty. And all I could think was, that was my pain. Those were my memories. But now they were hers, stamped and sealed. And I was the intruder. One afternoon, I got a call from my building manager. He said someone had reported me for suspicious behavior. A neighbor claimed I'd been leaving strange notes. I hadn't. I barely left my apartment. But paranoia spreads like ink, fast and bleeding into everything. I could feel it happening, the slow, steady erosion of credibility, of sanity. This is how people disappear. Not with violence, with dismissal. I reached back into memory for grounding. Tried to revisit old journals, forums, letters, any trace of my past that still belonged to me. But I'd burned so much of it in my 20s, trying to start fresh. I hadn't realized that in reinventing myself, I'd left the door open for someone else to fill the space I'd vacated. That was when I remembered something strange. Something tiny. Something I hadn't thought about in years. There was a girl named Mira. She had worked with Jenna briefly. I'd seen her tagged in photos once, back before the rebrand became total. She was always in the background, quiet, a little awkward. The kind of assistant people forget is even in the room. I didn't know why her name came back to me, but I looked her up. She was hard to find. Her social media was locked down. But LinkedIn gave me a breadcrumb. A 2-month stint at Olive James Consulting, listed under administrative support. No details. I sent her a message anyway. Short. Careful. You don't know me. But I think we have something in common. She didn't reply. For days. And then she did. Just a single line. I've been waiting for this. She used a burner email address. No signature. No emojis. No warm sign-off. Just a file attached and a line typed in clean, unstyled text. I'm not brave, but I'm tired of being scared. The file was a screenshot. An internal memo Jenna had written to her team a few months earlier, marked confidential. In it, she instructed staff to flag any online content referencing her former name, Jenna or Dot, and erase or distance from it where possible. It included a bullet point that made my stomach tighten. There's a woman who may try to contact you claiming to know me from foster care. This is a delusional situation. Don't engage. Forward any communication to legal. It was followed by a grainy photo of me from a college ID. The caption read, known alias, Olive J, not affiliated. She hadn't just blurred my face. She'd erased me preemptively, plotted the deletion like a campaign. Mira, though I didn't know if that was her real name anymore, sent nothing else that night. No explanation. No context. But something about the silence felt sacred, not evasive. Like she knew I needed time to absorb it without panic. I didn't sleep. Again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was the adrenaline of being believed. Of seeing, in hard proof, the architecture of someone else's lie. Mira reached out again 2 days later. This time, from a voice account. No video, just a quiet recording of her voice reading a message. She sounded young. Maybe younger than me. Soft. Careful. Like someone who had spent her life walking through rooms where other people took up all the space. She said she'd started working for Jenna, Olive, right after college. That she was hired through a job board and had no idea what she was stepping into. That at first, Jenna had seemed brilliant. Magnetic. Warm in that way people are when they know you have no boundaries yet. But then came the edits. The emails Mira was told to delete. The brand alignment she had to retroactively apply to old blog posts. The background scrubbing. The gentle silencing of any voice that contradicted the origin story. At first, Mira thought it was just part of being a personal assistant, curating, protecting an image. But then Jenna began talking about things Mira didn't understand. A sister who'd died young, but only emotionally. A ghost from the system. A shadow she had outlived. Mira had assumed it was metaphor. Until she found my forum post. The one from years ago. The one Jenna had lifted almost word for word. She said she absorbed stories, Myra's voice whispered through the speaker. That if someone doesn't use theirs, it becomes fair game. That some people are too broken to be narrators, so others have to take over. I sat very still after that. The kind of still that only comes when a wound starts to pulse in rhythm with your heartbeat. Jenna hadn't stolen out of desperation. She'd stolen because she believed she had the right to. Because she had decided I was too small, too unstable, too unprofitable to matter. I wondered how many others there were. How many forgotten girls she'd mined for anecdotes. How many half-memories she'd scavenged from orphaned comment threads and obscure message boards, weaving them into a narrative that sold. Mira told me she'd left 6 weeks ago. Quietly. No confrontation. Just an email and a scrubbed resume. Jenna doesn't react when people leave, Mira said in a second voice recording. She replaces them. Pretends they never existed. It's her way of controlling the narrative. If something doesn't serve the story, it vanishes. That was what had almost happened to me. But now there was a crack, and I could feel air rushing in. Over the next month, Mira and I became partners in an invisible war. She sent small packets of proof, deleted drafts, emails, legal letters, timestamps. Nothing explosive. But together, they painted a picture. A calculated theft. A person so practiced at reshaping reality that she'd built a career on the bones of someone else's pain. Sometimes Mira and I talked late into the night. Not as whistleblower and witness, but as women who'd both been minimized by the same machinery. Her in silence. Me in erasure. We never spoke about healing. Not in the Instagrammable way. We spoke about utility, evidence, strategy. But in between the planning, something gentler began to take root. Recognition. We both knew what it was like to be overlooked, to be in the room and not counted, to be essential to someone else's success, but invisible in their story. We didn't say we trusted each other. We didn't need to. We were already risking too much not to. There was one file that changed everything. A video, taken accidentally, Mira said. She'd been filming a training module on her phone and left it recording after the call ended. What came next was a 10-minute private meeting Jenna had with another staffer, unknowing that the call was still active on Myra's line. Jenna was laughing, mocking the trauma world, talking about sadness as currency. She bragged about knowing exactly when to cry on stage, when to pause before revealing a deep memory. And then she said it. She doesn't even know what she lost. She never used it. She wasted it. I made it into something beautiful. That was when I knew we had her. Not just in spirit, but on tape. This wasn't just poetic justice. This was a crack in the legal armor she'd built. Proof of intent. Proof of deception. I watched the video 5 times. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to memorize her face. The way it shifted when no one was looking. The mask peeled off. She wasn't radiant. She wasn't broken. She was performing. And I was done being her backdrop. I didn't want a viral moment. I didn't want drama. I wanted accuracy. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted her to feel the way I had. Disbelieved. Erased. Staring into a world that mirrored nothing back. But I didn't want to become her in the process. I wanted justice, not spectacle. So I started with the one thing she had edited out of the story, the truth. The lawyer Mira helped me find wasn't impressed by Jenna's facade. She didn't use words like influencer or public figure. She used words like misappropriation, exploitative authorship, and personality fraud. She called Jenna's online persona what it was, a manufactured identity, one built on unethical appropriation of lived experience. I've seen this before, she told me calmly. She just wrapped it in prettier language. We began building the case from the inside out. No clickbait. No emotionally manipulative summaries. Just receipts. I gave her access to everything I'd saved. Myra's evidence, my original writings, submission records, forum timestamps, even juvenile reports and school counseling logs that included phrases Jenna had quoted verbatim in her memoir. Piece by piece, we constructed a mosaic not of bitterness, but of deliberate theft. She hadn't stumbled onto my past. She had mined it, polished it, and sold it as her own healing crystal. It wasn't just plagiarism. It was identity laundering. And we had the paper trail. The lawsuit was surgical. No dramatic headlines. No press blitz. Just a sharp, focused complaint filed in civil court that laid everything bare. Jenna, Olive, was named directly. So was her old name, the one she'd scrubbed from public record. For the first time in years, her past was showing. I braced for backlash. But something surprising happened. The backlash never came, not for me. Instead, the story began to leak in strange, quiet ways. An anonymous source posted about the case in a subreddit dedicated to influencer fraud. A few small Twitter accounts started connecting dots. Then someone dug up Myra's leaked audio, 10 raw minutes of Jenna laughing about borrowing narratives and mocking her followers. Sadness is currency, she'd said, and I know how to spend it. Within hours, it was clipped, quoted, subtitled, memed. And then the real storm hit. A mid-sized independent journalist named Celeste reached out. She wasn't glossy. She didn't care about trends. But she knew a fraud case when she saw one, and her track record was ironclad. She requested access, not for gossip, but for context. "Don't give me the pain," she said in our one phone call. "Give me the paper trail. I want to write about the architecture of deception." I trusted her. When her piece dropped, it detonated slowly, like a fuse rather than a bomb. First a ripple, then a flood. #FakeOlive trended for 2 days straight. Her most loyal followers clung to disbelief at first. "You're just jealous. Everyone shares similar trauma. No one owns pain." But the proof was too detailed to dismiss, too brutal in its alignment. The real fracture came when survivors, actual former foster youth, former clients, people who had spoken on her retreats, began to recognize themselves in her anecdotes. Slightly altered names, recycled lines, whole paragraphs lifted and reframed in her voice. She hadn't just stolen from me. She'd stolen from dozens. Jenna, now exposed by name, tried to pivot. A thin apology video went up, full of vague language about blurry lines between inspiration and experience and narrative empathy. It lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Comments were turned off. By then, it was too late. Her book was pulled from shelves. Sponsors severed ties. A podcast episode that once topped Spotify charts was scrubbed without explanation. Her publisher issued a careful, legal-laced statement reclassifying her memoir as a fictionalized retelling of a composite journey. A composite. A Frankenstein of other people's scars. Marketed under the banner of healing. I didn't celebrate. Not in the way people expected. There was no champagne. No mic drop. No triumphant Instagram post. I let the evidence speak. I let her own voice do the damage. But I did post one thing. A blog entry. Quiet, unpromoted, raw. Titled simply, "My name is Olive James. I am not a brand." I wrote about the danger of silence. The way people think healing means moving on without naming the harm. I wrote about the difference between storytelling and theft. And at the end, I posted one photo. Me. Not a glamour shot. Not retouched. Just a scanned Polaroid from a group home field trip. Me in oversized jeans, arms crossed over my chest, squinting at the sun. No filter. No arc. Just presence. The post didn't go viral. I didn't want it to. But it reached who it needed to. I received quiet messages, former group home kids, writers who'd been ripped off, assistants who'd ghosted employers like Jenna in fear. They didn't say congrats. They said, me too. I never answered most of them, but I read every word. The lawsuit ended in a settlement. I wasn't allowed to speak about the specifics, and I didn't need to. It wasn't about money, it was about recognition. I used part of the settlement to pay off the debt that had chained me to anonymity. I used another part to move out of the city. Not to disappear, but to reappear somewhere new. Somewhere that didn't already know me as a shadow. I chose a small town on the edge of nowhere. Trees instead of skyscrapers. A library instead of a co-working space. I found work with a nonprofit that serves kids transitioning out of the system. Real work. Quiet, hard, necessary. Some days, the urge to scroll resurfaces. To check what's left of Jenna's empire. But I don't feed it. Her accounts are mostly inactive now. Every once in a while, she tries to rebrand, but the internet doesn't forget what's been recorded. More importantly, I don't forget. And that's enough. Because what she never understood, what people like her never do, is that healing isn't a brand. It's not a storyline. It's not something you perform in soft lighting with #wisdom. Healing is showing up in your own life and refusing to be extracted from it again. I kept the file folder Mira gave me, not because I want to reopen the wound, but because I want to remember the shape of what was taken, and how I took it back. Mira, for what it's worth, is doing well. We still talk. We share articles sometimes, trade book recs, meet once a year for coffee and silence. There's no need to rehash the past. We both lived it. That's enough. She once told me it wasn't just that she lied. It's that she decided we didn't matter enough to own the truth. We matter now. I used to think being forgotten was the worst thing that could happen to a person. Now I understand. It's being remembered incorrectly. Misrepresented. Rewritten into something ornamental. Someone else's character arc. A prop and a lie. That's what Jenna did to me. She didn't just take my name. She hollowed it out, carved it into something beautiful and marketable, and left me holding the shell. I've spent the last year quietly rebuilding from that theft, not with fire or fury, but with something far less cinematic: consistency. A consistent voice, telling a consistent truth. A consistent life, finally lived for myself. It doesn't look impressive from the outside. My apartment is modest. My job at the nonprofit pays enough, but not more. I spend most days in plain clothes, helping kids with paperwork they don't understand and filling out housing forms that don't work fast enough. But for the first time in my life, I feel rooted. Not floating, not erased, not watching someone else wear my story like a designer coat. I walk to work. I drink my coffee black. I go to the same corner store every week, where the clerk now knows my name. My name, Olive James. It feels strange saying it aloud after so many years of ducking behind variations, abbreviations, pseudonyms, and mispronunciations. At first, the name sat awkwardly in my mouth, too familiar and too foreign at once, like an old song you haven't heard since childhood. But now it fits. Not perfectly. Not like a glove. Like skin. There's a kind of power in reclaiming something you were told was too damaged to keep. People ask if I'm going to write a book. The answer is no. At least, not right now. The thing about surviving theft like that, narrative theft, identity theft, is that you become hyper-aware of what your story costs. You become cautious about who gets to hold your truth, who gets to shape it, echo it, flatten it into archetypes. I'm not ready to hand that over again. Not even to a publisher. Not even to a sympathetic audience. Instead, I write things no one sees. Quiet pieces. Personal essays that sit in folders on my desktop, dated but not titled. They're not declarations. They're anchors. Reminders. Every paragraph says the same thing in a different way. I was here. This happened. I matter. I see versions of my younger self sometimes, in the kids who walk through our office doors, wide-eyed, jumpy, already used to being studied but not believed. They don't say much at first. They test silence like it's a trap. And I understand that. I try to be a different kind of presence. Not soft. Not hard. Solid. Someone who doesn't need them to bleed to believe them. When one of the girls asked me if Olive James was a fake name, I laughed for a long time. Not because it was funny, but because it used to be such a complicated answer. Now it isn't. No, I told her. It's mine. I just forgot how to wear it for a while. She didn't ask any more questions. She didn't need to. I don't keep tabs on Jenna anymore. She moved cities, probably changed her name again. The last I heard, she was doing story architecture consulting for executives who want to seem emotionally intelligent. No followers. No book deals. No more carefully curated breakdowns on camera. But that's not my story anymore. She's not in it. The final piece I had to reclaim wasn't legal or digital. It was internal. It was my memory. For years, I'd edited myself out of the narrative without realizing it. I tried so hard to survive quietly that I forgot I was supposed to exist loudly. I buried the messiest parts of myself thinking it made me cleaner. Easier to believe. Easier to love. But I've learned something since then. Your life doesn't become more valuable when someone else packages it. It doesn't gain worth from neatness or monetization. It is worthy because it is yours. Messy. Incomplete. Out of order. You don't have to hand it over to make it count. Some days, I still catch my reflection and flinch, ghosts of former selves still hiding in the tilt of my chin, in the way I brace my shoulders like I'm still expecting to be doubted. But I meet my own gaze now. I don't look away. And I say it in my head like a spell. A name. A full sentence. A reclamation. My name is Olive James. And I am not a story someone else can tell better.